this is really interesting. Have you been following any of the story on Pete Davidson?
No, I saw
From Saturday Night
headlines,
Live,
but I don't know what's going on with
SNL over the weekend. He tweeted out on an Instagram post that he felt that he was at a point where he just hates being a part of the world. He hates being here, and everybody kind of perceived this as maybe a suicide message, and I think it was. So on SNL on Saturday, he was in a pre-recorded bit, and also they allowed him, but he was live. He introduced the musical act. Other than that, he didn't do anything. But word is now that SNL actually reached out to medical professionals, and he was I don't know if he was admitted necessarily, but he did seek treatment because he was in the midst of depression. He's got a lot going on. He lost his girlfriend, and you remember the story where he went after, told a joke about the veteran,
Congressman Crenshaw,
with the patch. But here's the story. Dan Crenshaw says he saw the Instagram post, saw the story, and actually reached out to Pete Davidson and called him after reading his Instagram post. Here's some audio.
Pretty devastating. You don't want to see somebody in that kind of position to the point where they're actually putting out a cry for help on social media. That's not a good place to be in. I talked to him personally and talked to him for a little bit about it. And, we don't go back very far. We're not good friends, but I think he appreciated hearing from me. And what I told him was this: everybody has a purpose in this world. God put you here for a reason, but it's your job to find that purpose. Okay, and you should live that way. You should live that way, always seeking out that purpose, not expecting it to be given to you by anybody else, and know that you have value and that you maybe do more good than you realize for people, especially a guy like that. He makes people laugh. Sometimes he makes people mad, but he makes people laugh a lot. And that's what we talked about. It was a good conversation.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I know this may sound a little cliche, but one of my favorite movies of all time is It's a Wonderful Life for that exact reason, because, you watch it every time and you think to yourself, oh, yeah, no, there would be a lot of people that would be impacted if I wasn't here. So, I mean, it's
so funny. You took it to It's a Wonderful Life.
But
that's
right. That's why it's my favorite movie for personal reasons.
Yeah.
And, it just goes to show you that sometimes those that, we saw it with Robin Williams. People who like to be outgoing sometimes and funny aren't always the ones that are happy inside.
Well, that was, what he's certainly gone through a lot, and to have it play out nationally in the news is it's pretty big.
Hopefully, he's got some real good friends around him who can help support him.
I don't think so. Everybody hates him. So.
The comment, I guess it was on Instagram, I really don't want to be on this earth anymore.
That's the comment.
And then he deleted that post. He then deleted, that was part of a larger posting that he had made. And then he deleted his account. And then, as you said, I believe the police were sent over to do like a welfare check on him. Fortunately, he was okay. You said he was on SNL, but it was a pre-recorded bit?
Yeah, a pre-recorded bit, and he introduced the musical act, which was Miley Cyrus. He introduced Miley Cyrus.
It's tough.
He introduced her by saying, boy, I wish she was my girlfriend. Because he was with that young
Ariana Grande.
Yeah, and that didn't end well.
Speaking of cliche, I hope this isn't cliche, but I'll give the number. It's tough when you feel alone and you're down, and there just seems to be like no end in sight, and it's that loneliness. So if anyone needs the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. And I think people often think nobody cares about them, and it's not true.
Yeah. Today, Mary Poppins returns. Hits theaters. The name of the movie is Mary Poppins.
Oh, she's not
returns.
Going to be in studio this morning.
Mary Poppins Returns is the name of the movie. It hits theaters today, and it's been 54 years since Dick Van Dyke was in the original. Dick Van Dyke is how old? 91 years old.
Really?
Yeah. And he is in the sequel. He played two parts the first time around, Bert the Chimney Sweep and Mr. Dawes the banker. In this version of Mary Poppins, he plays the son of Mr. Dawes. Here is Bert in the original. A little audio for you. I told you it was a little. Just a little. Must be a setting. 7:29. Hold tight. Coming right back. Our free money question of the day comes up here in a few minutes. from the Hobica Law Firm. It's worth $100. Some that came into play just yesterday. Right?
A mere 6 hours ago.
We are.
Lord. I was going to say I am
Oh, man.
too old for this crap.
No.
Yeah, I think I am.
I don't know. You're not too old for the karaoke.
I barely have a voice today because I was like screaming out those,
Well,
trying to hit
you
those notes.
killed it,
As
man.
we
You brought the
learned
house
last
down.
night, you are never too old for karaoke, okay, as we learned last night.
Careful. Be careful.
It's funny.
Sorry, it's a...
Oh, boy.
Didn't get a lot of sleep last night, and...
As my wife said, what the hell were you thinking?
We weren't. That's the point. We never do.
Yeah. And I was so close to hum. Just didn't quite get there. Anyway, coming up, we'll talk to... I love the magazine Consumer Reports. It's one of my favorite magazines in the world. You know, they don't do any ads. They don't take any
Really?
advertisements. And the reason they don't is because they don't want to be swayed by
Makes sense.
anyone that they criticize.
So they're 100% user funded?
Subscription. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's still the case, but we're going to talk to their senior money editor, Toby Stranger, coming up in a few minutes. And there's a new Consumer Report study out there about the best places to live, the best places to work, and all of that. And I think maybe we're on the list. Who knows? Probably not. Anyway, we'll do that coming up in a second. Chance to win our free money question of the day this morning. It's worth $100 from the Hobica Law Firm. And on the line right now is Richard in New Hartford. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning. How you doing, Bill?
Wonderful.
Richard, you're not the guy who emails me every day, are you?
No, honest, I'm not. No, once in a while I call them. I complain about the hospital and stuff like that. But
So
no,
you hate the downtown hospital concept.
No, I don't. I just figure it's not right because people don't have the right to vote.
Right, yeah. Okay,
like
that's
that.
fair enough.
Yeah.
You know, I
think-
do oftentimes wonder, though, could you imagine if we voted on the Erie Canal? Could you?
I would have voted for that.
You would have, but guess
Yeah.
what? Chances are it was considered like a crazy waste of money at the time, or the railroad system.
I would have voted for that.
So let me ask you this: if you had,
We have Richard's vote on the canal and the railroad system.
well, I'm saying if you had the
Abe
option,
Lincoln would have been proud, just for the record.
if you had the
got a beard.
option to vote for, if you had the option to vote for the hospital, would you be supportive of it? Because right now you don't like it because you can't vote on it.
Right now I wouldn't, but if they ever, majority agreed, I would go along with it.
Yeah.
I'd say, hey, the majority wants it, and that's right. But it's just such a congested area and so much confusion about the emails and all this stuff.
Oh, the email.
Yeah, the email thing. And I do think that recent email story is kind of an old story. Weren't those emails out when we broke that story a year and a half ago?
Yep.
But
I think they're all probably still on our website too.
I think so, but
people
somehow
want to
they've
find
now resurfaced. So, all right, let's give you the money here, Richard. Okay.
Okay, I'm ready for it. I got my wallet open.
All right, as you should. It's funny how the money just flows out of Hobica's wallet right into yours. Let's make it happen. Here we go. As I gave a little clue, I hope you heard that clue, and you know a little bit about Penny Marshall, who passed away. I guess it shocks me that she was 75 years old, but she has passed away. Here's your question. 7 seconds to answer it. What is Penny Marshall's brother's name? Ready? Go.
Peter Marshall. Gary Marshall.
You're going to go with Gary Marshall,
That's the director.
which means we have now had 3 winners out of 4 days. Gary Marshall is her brother. I always thought Gary Marshall was her father. Not the case. She's 75 years old. I mean, she was.
Yeah, he's still alive, isn't he? Or did he pass away?
I believe he's
the last
still
couple
alive.
Of years?
I believe he is still alive. So, we were talking about Consumer Reports, one of my favorite magazines in the world.
He died in 2016. Sorry.
Oh, he did die.
Oh, he did.
Northeasterners give holiday gifts and tips more often than Americans in other parts of the country. How about that? So there's a new Consumer Report study out there revealing who tips the best and where they live. And Toby Stranger, which is in complete contrast to what I had promoted like 10 minutes earlier. But
That's all right.
listen, it is what it is. Toby Stranger is from Consumer Reports. Good morning.
Good morning.
So if you could explain here. So in the Northeast, we're pretty good when it comes to holiday gifts and tipping.
Yeah, so Consumer Reports did a nationally representative survey all over the country, and we asked people what they tipped in the last holiday season. We asked them in the spring so they might have remembered what they did, earlier last year.
Right.
And we found that Northeasterners, indeed, the percentage who tip at the holidays or give a gift at the holidays to a service provider is 69%.
Wow.
And that compares with around 60% for the rest of the country.
That's pretty big, right? And it's funny, when you go to New York, for instance, New York City, tipping is like, it's almost mandatory. You might have someone actually say, hello, you're supposed to tip me here.
I've had somebody tell me what to tip them before.
Yeah, and it kind of spreads out from there, right?
Yes, and in fact, Consumer Reports is going to be, we have another report coming out about tipping in general, which I think will be very revealing. This particular report was about holiday tipping, and what we found is that people, in general, Americans give on average about $45 when they tip, and they tip to a variety of people, but it's more often to people that they know, service providers like a housekeeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about, does it say who we should or who we should not tip?
That really is your preference,
Okay.
but we do find when we do this tipping survey every year that it's the people who you have, the person who cuts your hair, the person who babysits your child, even teachers. They don't get tips so often because that could be considered a bribe.
Right.
But, they do
great.
get gifts, and it's often the people that you see on a regular basis that you want to thank for their service at the end of the year.
I certainly advise people to tip your teacher, and I think the way to do it is not with money but wine. That seems to work.
Bill's wife's a teacher, so
that's correct. Yeah, we get a lot of wine at the holiday time. So, what? Even your mailman or mail lady, a mail carrier, is somebody you probably could tip. But
you could, although it's interesting with the post office, with the postal service, they actually have rules. They say no gifts of more than $20, and they don't.
Really?
They don't approve of cash, but there are other tips of $20 value or less that you can give your mail carrier if you want to.
So I want to ask you about the difference because. You would, like, if you have a paper boy come or a paper girl, you would typically leave a tip. But for mail, I think that's much less common. Is there?
I always leave something for the mail person, the mail carrier, every year.
Do you find a trend there's difference in if somebody is paying for the service, they're more apt to tip them versus, your mail is a free service, right? Is there any information on that?
Yeah, Consumer Reports didn't look at that, but, when I've talked to experts, basically what they'll say is, there's no need to tip your doctor.
Right.
He's probably making more than you anyway. Anybody who, if they own the business, often they may not get a tip as much as, say, an employee of the business who's helping you.
And that's a big,
we just talked about
that. That is a big thing about. And were you asking me how
we just talking?
And my answer was, if the person owns the business, you're tipping them every time you pay them.
Correct.
It's up to you, I guess. I want to ask Toby, if we could, just about Consumer Reports, which because I really feel Consumer Reports remains a relevant magazine, unlike so many other magazines that have gone by the wayside, gone to the internet. Consumer Reports is something special. You really look for that when it comes in the mail, whether it's the auto guide or the appliance guide. But is it still the case that Consumer Reports does not take advertising?
Yes, you're absolutely right. We do not take advertising, and all the products that we test, including all the cars that we test, we buy those ourselves, and we use sort of secret shoppers to purchase so that the companies don't necessarily know that we are purchasing these for testing, so they can't doctor the products. We don't take gifts of that kind. We do take charitable contributions because we are a nonprofit.
Mm-hmm. I will tell you that I have a bit of a, Toby, don't take this the wrong way, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with you, Consumer Reports. Every time I want to buy something, and I've kind of figured it out, my wife is like, nope, doesn't rate well on Consumer Reports. So
sorry about that.
Everything we buy, I have to tell you, everything we buy goes through the catalog, the magazine. So it's all good stuff. Interesting survey, Toby. Let's do this again. I'd love to do it after the first of the year, just on tipping in general. I think
that would be terrific. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Toby Stranger, thank you. We appreciate it greatly. She is
Take
the
care.
senior money editor at Consumer Reports magazine, which how many magazines have really just disappeared?
I know.
Consumer Reports stays strong, and they also do that. If you subscribe, they do the catalog, and it's everything inside. It's a little book, and it's pretty accurate at the very least. That's according to my wife.
So I believe they have a website as well, and I've
I think you get if you subscribe, you also get a subscription to the website as well.
So in looking up different products and things I was going to buy, I've actually come across the website several times and went to look up something, and it's like, well, in order to do this, you need to subscribe. And I was kind of put off by that, but knowing that that's how they survive and they don't do outside advertising,
That's
actually,
it.
I'm okay with that.
And at least it gives you something to rely on to say, okay, I'm buying a dishwasher, and they've really put it through a rigorous test, and all of them, and there's no one there sliding them a little bit of extra advertising to get a better rating, which is a big deal. Do you realize that? This is all pre-recorded. None of this is live.
Can I tell you, I got a call this morning. I think it was right after we did our go ahead.
I've been here for 5 years. I have never overslept.
We got a call this morning, and they said...
But I did this morning.
It was Andrew and I doing some small talk. So
And they didn't call me until 6:30. It's like, what are you waiting for?
Well, I texted you before that, and I said, what? We didn't get a reply. I think I should call him.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because that's not you. That's not you.
I've never been... I mean, I'm late for everything, but I have never overslept.
I'll tell you, someone said to me, the caller said, is Bill coming in today? I said, yeah. They said, is he? Because I'm a fan of the Bill Keeler show, and then hung up the phone. I'm like, okay.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you for saying you didn't want to hear my voice anymore.
I love your wife too, but I mean, you're blaming us, but I mean, she was like, yeah, what were you doing? I was wondering what you were doing still in bed.
I'm like, Allison, I have never.
You didn't wake me up?
I'm saying this could go back like years. I cannot remember a time when I have overslept. I mean, I'll always be late. I will always be late. But I'm up at 4:30. I'm up at 4:30, 5 o'clock on the weekends. Today
It was that much fun last night.
Listen, I've got a party. We have a party yesterday afternoon. We had an event last night. Then we were stupid and continued the event into later. I have a Christmas party today. I have one tonight. I have one tomorrow afternoon. It's a busy, busy week, and for some reason, maybe I'm just getting older. I can't seem to handle it anymore.
It's beginning to look a lot more like a hangover.
Yeah. Anyway, you were saying.
No, just the caller missed you, and I think
Thank you for that.
Didn't miss Andrew and I. So you were only gone for an hour, but welcome back.
As I always say, it's never the same unless it's the full crew.
Sure.
Al Kruger, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks
Sorry
for having me on.
you've had to sit through that.
No, not at all.
Good. So you're from the Salvation Army in Rome.
Yes, sir.
And so are you guys doing okay? I've heard a lot of talk about it's hard to get people to ring the bell this year.
Yeah, we've actually been doing really, really well with volunteers this year. The national trend is been that the Salvation Army's been kind of hurting with volunteers this year. But thankfully in Rome, we've been doing really, really well.
And you guys are, I believe, one of the recipients of our toy program.
Yes, thank you for that.
And right now, Operation Sunshine is very much in need of cash, and you can call the OD to make a donation. But you guys provide not just toys, but a lot of relief for families this time of year.
Yeah, we're obviously most visible during the Christmas season. And our distribution day is tomorrow. 400 families are going to come through our doors, and they'll receive clothing and presents for their children and a gift card for a food basket for Christmas dinner.
Wow.
So that's when we're most visible, but we're providing services all throughout the year in the form of rental assistance and heat assistance and grocery assistance and prescription assistance.
All
and
year
the list
long.
goes on and on.
Yeah.
You do that too for like relief from like a fire or flooding and stuff like that as
Yeah,
well?
absolutely. Our emergency disaster services, when there's a fire or flooding, we respond to those things as well.
What do you need?
At the moment, we our kettle effort, we're only out there for a few more days, the red kettles, and we are slightly behind. We're not hurting as bad as the national average says.
Yeah.
The national average says the Salvation Army's down about 10-15% across the board.
And you know what? It shouldn't be, because we seem to be spending more this year. Gas prices are down. It seems that salaries are up in many cases. And the national average is that we're out there spending a lot more this year. So one would think that the charities would be doing better.
Yeah, in one sense we are. Our toy drives were excellent this year.
Yeah.
We've been able to really have a record number of families sign up this year. Last year was the highest we'd ever served at 340 families, and this year was nearly 400.
Wow.
So what we found is the need is great. But in the Rome community especially, the generosity of our donors has been fantastic. Yeah. So the toys and the clothing drives have been great for us. The kettles are down slightly, not bad. We're about $1,500, short of where we need to be to hit our goal for the year. So I can't complain too much about that. The community's been great.
I do want to thank you for the shirt I'm wearing. My mother picked it up at the Alien Salvation Army. Said, listen, it had only been worn a couple of times. Got it for 50 cents.
If you have a sharp eye, you can get some great sales at the Salvation Army.
It is not exclusive to, let's just say everybody goes to the Salvation Army. And if you don't, you're missing out.
One of the things has to be for the red kettle shortage has to be online shopping and the fact that I don't carry cash or change a lot. I always have the card. Do you think that has something to do with it?
Yeah, I definitely think that has something to do with it. I very rarely will have cash on me, and we hear from a lot of people passing by at the red kettles. You guys should take credit cards, or you should have a text to give option.
That happens. I mean,
we're actually working on it now. I'll be doing this crazy 24-hour kettle starting on Friday. And we will have a text to give option for that. The signage will be up for all of that information.
You personally will be out for 24 hours?
Yeah, starting Friday at 6 p.m. I'll be standing ringing the bell for 24 consecutive hours at the Rome
awesome.
Walmart.
At the Rome Walmart?
Yes.
Good for you. That's really
so
cool.
People can also literally go and donate to his kettle at any point, but also he said the text option. There's also a website. If you go to the Rome Salvation Army Facebook page, they can actually donate online during the 24-hour period as well.
Yes, and we have a very generous family that supports the Salvation Army all throughout the year. They do wish to remain anonymous, but they've given a pretty nice gift so that the first $6,000 that go into the kettle are matched during that 24-hour kettle. So you can go online, you can give online, you can do the text to give. All of that information's on our Facebook page. And then certainly money that goes into the kettle during that 24 hours at the Rome Walmart will all be matched up to $6,000.
So in Rome, awesome. You must be like you're like a little hero out there. So
either that or the village idiot,
or
one of the two.
There he is again. Can you believe it? 24 hours. That's very, very cool. So if you could talk about the Salvation Army. First of all, the money that comes in stays local.
Absolutely. Yes, every penny that goes into the red bucket stays local. So if you find yourself in the Utica community and you're giving to a bucket at the Utica Walmart or any of the shops around Utica, that money stays in Utica. If you're in Rome and you drop money in the red bucket, that money stays in Rome.
Okay.
So if you're a very conscious donor and you want your money to stay local, to help local families, the Salvation Army Red Bucket is a good opportunity for you to help your fellow neighbors.
And then the Salvation Army, in general, it's a Christian organization, right?
Yes.
Can you just give a little background on a little of the history, because we take the Salvation Army for granted. It's something we grew up with and we all know, but probably don't know.
Yeah, a lot of people just kind of see the Salvation Army as the thrift store. That's kind of their understanding of the Salvation Army.
Well, with a shirt like this, how can you?
Yeah,
not?
for 50 cents, it looks great on you.
Yeah, it really does.
So the Salvation Army is first and foremost a church. A lot of people don't understand that.
I had no idea.
I did not know that.
Yeah, the Salvation Army is a church. We're very Methodist in our beliefs. Started in 1865 in England. We're now in 124 countries around the world. So the Salvation Army is a massive organization, and we do what we do out of our love for God, and we really want to be able to help our community to be a better place to live.
So to become a director, your position is what? It's more of a military
that's the interesting
right?
thing, yeah.
Yeah, we have kind of a militaristic ranking system. I'm a captain in the Salvation Army.
Okay.
That means I've been a Salvation Army officer for less than 15 years. I have 3 years to go. I'll be a major. So once you hit 15 years, you're a major. And that's kind of the last rank you earn by merit. Everything else, lieutenant colonel, all of that is by your appointment.
You get to general, you actually could get a role in the White House. They're looking for a chief of staff. It's all possible.
So, we have this very militaristic ranking system. But my wife and I are the administrators of the Salvation Army in Rome. So our job is to just oversee not only the church operations, but our social service operations. We're one of the largest social service providers in the county. Providing food and clothing and rental
and I've always found that the Rome Salvation Army is one of the more active in the area. You guys I've been doing toy drives for several years, and you're always there to lobby for the toys because it's you have people to give to. And
we have great need. My wife and I have been in Rome for a year and a half now. We came last June.
Where'd you come from?
5 years previous to that, we were in Portland, Maine. The Salvation Army had us there.
Which is an awesome city.
It is. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I love
It's a great
Portland.
part of the country. And then for 5 years before that, we were in the Hudson Valley. Port Jervis, New York. But what we have really found in our 18 months or so in Rome is really two things. Rome is a place of great need. But Rome is also a place of great generosity.
Yeah.
It's a community that kind of rallies around each other. And so it's a fun place for my wife and I to kind of work and come shoulder to shoulder with people.
Any other questions? I'm glad I asked the question about the Salvation Army because we kind of learned things that we
never heard that
took for granted here today.
So again, just so you say it's a church, but so there's services at your facility in Rome?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there would be a rank of... like maybe a captain would give the service almost like the pastor?
Yeah, my wife and I are ordained pastors. We went to seminary school just like any other preacher or reverend in your local church. And so every Sunday morning we have church services at 11 o'clock. We have a midweek Bible study. We have youth programs just like any other church would.
I never knew that.
I did not know that. That's why it's like, sorry, my mind is blown.
It's fascinating, isn't it? A lot of people just, they kind of see us out at Christmas time ringing the bell. They see the thrift stores.
Yeah.
But the Salvation Army is so much more than that.
And what happened in New York City, if you go to New York, they're ringing the bell, and it's always someone dressed up as Santa Claus. Yeah. We don't really do that up here. And give me a little background on that.
Well, it's actually, if you see the people dressed up as Santa Claus, it's actually not the Salvation Army. It's the Volunteers of America. So,
I didn't know that.
Here's another little piece of fun history there. The Volunteers of America actually spun off from the Salvation Army. So the founders of the Salvation Army were the Booth family, William and Catherine Booth.
Okay.
And one of his sons kind of split away from the Salvation Army and started the Volunteers of America. And those are the folks that are in the Santa suits in the city pretty heavily.
Okay. Did he come to like the Salvation Army's wooden door and pound a letter on the door with a proclamation? Is that how it happened?
No, honestly, I'm not real tight on the history of the forming of the VOA.
There's a little other history.
There's a song from the 60s, I think, Volunteers of America. I don't know if it's related at all. But.
Interesting. I never knew that. So
so the Salvation Army, you will occasionally see a Salvation Army person out there in a Santa suit or a Santa hat, but that's kind of the VOA shtick. We kind of let them have the Santa at the but you don't see them around a lot. They're in the big metropolitan areas.
Right.
The Salvation Army's kind of everywhere.
Okay.
You're never usually more than 20 minutes from
and had
Salvation
no
Army.
idea that it came from England either. That's and no idea that it was Methodist. I'm a Methodist as well. So, all right. Well, very interesting stuff. We learned a lot today, and I appreciate it. One more time to give to the Salvation Army of Rome. It's really pretty simple.
Yeah, a couple of ways to do it. You can go on our Facebook page, the Salvation Army of Rome, New York, and there you'll find a link to our website. As well as the text to give information, or you could always come out to a Red Kettle. I'll be at the Walmart in Rome Friday 6 p.m. to Saturday 6 p.m., and every penny that goes into that bucket up to $6,000 will be matched.
Very awesome. And congratulations on the 24-hour run. That's really big. So
thank you very much.
All right, thanks. We'll break Christmas in the Valley. And it had a whole bunch of local politicians and community leaders, radio, TV people, all singing in the choir in the background. Pretty cool.
Central New York staple.
No doubt. Ryan Nobles actually was singing on that song during the break. During the break, he was hearing it on hold. Good morning, Ryan Nobles.
It warmed my heart to hear that song. I feel like it's not really Christmas until I hear Christmas in the Valley.
Yeah.
That brings back a lot of great memories.
No doubt. Ryan, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are you guys? You guys ready for Christmas?
We are, and are you in town? Are you up here for the holidays? Or are you going to be?
So I've got a busy few weeks. I'm going to be at my in-laws in Fort Plain on Christmas Eve. I'll be there Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, but I'm actually going to be in New York between Christmas and New Year's. I'll be anchoring quite a bit, so you can watch me be doing the 2 to 4 show, filling in for Brooke Baldwin, and then doing the weekend show, and I'll be doing filling in for Kate Baldwin as well in the 11 a.m. show. So you can see me a lot while you're opening your
better
presents.
watch out. Noble's on their heels.
It's listen, you're about to make a even bigger name for yourself. Mm-hmm. What I would do is say something offensive while you're on, and
or sing a Christmas song.
I found through my career that has always worked for me. You really get your name right out there.
Well, my goal is every time I anchor, my goal is to get to go viral in some sort of a YouTube clip. So
yes.
That's,
all right.
That's what I go into every show with the hope of. And it hasn't translated yet. I got on Stephen Colbert once by anchoring, but that's the sum total of how far I've gone.
Well, if you need somebody to call in and say like Baba Booey or something like that, just give me a call.
All right, I'll let you know.
I'll get right on it. All right, Ryan, will there be a government shutdown? What do you think?
I think so. I'd say it's about 70-30 right now.
Wow.
I just don't think, it seems as though President Trump has just decided to kind of sit this one out. He doesn't, people have come to him with proposal ideas, and he just says no, doesn't say what he wants or what he doesn't want. I mean, he's pretty insistent on getting some sort of border wall funding, which, seems pretty clear is not going to happen. So, there's absolutely no motivation at all for Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to give the president what he wants here. They're going to get the keys to the government essentially in 3 weeks. So why would they cut a deal with him now that they then can't fix once they take power? So, they seem to hold all the cards. The president is kind of the type of politician that doesn't mind seeing the world burn. And I think the other thing, too, is that I think he's told himself in his mind that, the last time they did one of these government shutdowns to continue funding of the government, they did kind of a massive thing where 75% of the government would still be funded under a circumstance like this. So it's a much more narrow government shutdown. I don't necessarily know if that makes it much better, but I just think that there isn't a ton of will on Capitol Hill, and I think that's where we are. And let me make this quick point, Bill, before we move on to the next thing. Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, who's had a pretty impressive career in Washington politics, he's going to give his farewell address today. He has been absent in these conversations. When he announced over the summer that he wasn't going to run for re-election, that he was stepping down at the end of the year, he talked about running through the tape, how he was going to be working hard right up until the very last day. Mm-hmm. This is going to be the end of his legacy. The last thing that's going to happen on his watch while he's being Speaker of the House is the government's going to shut down. I mean, how does that play for Paul Ryan if somewhere down the road he wants to run for president? At
the holidays, too. It's the worst possible time because the optics just and I understand it's probably only 30% of the government workforce, but still, that's 30% of people that are going to be waiting for a paycheck, and I get it. They'll get paid back eventually, but waiting for a paycheck at the holiday time, that's not a good picture.
Yeah, living where I do in Northern Virginia, a lot of our friends and neighbors work for the government in some capacity, and one of the guys that walks the kids to school with me in the morning, I was talking to him about it, and he's like, a furlough wouldn't be that bad around Christmas time. We'll ultimately get paid. They feel comfortable that something's going to come through no matter what. But, you're 100% right, Bill. There's still a level of anxiety associated with it because not being able to get paid during this time of year is not an easy time for anybody. And I think you're 100% right. Yeah. Even though it may only be 30% of the government, the optics are not going to be good for any of these people in power. And I'm just surprised that they can't come up with something to get them over the hump.
So over the course of this, if it does occur, we're going to hear a lot of, you shut down the government. No, you shut down the government. Yeah. Who will end up really taking on the blame?
Well, I just think it's impossible for President Trump to not take the bulk of the blame. And that has got nothing to do with President Trump. Yep. It has everything to do with him being president of the United States. Right. It's hard for the president not to shoulder a lot of this blame. But I think you do add in the fact that, Nancy Pelosi really deftly handled the president in that meeting. Sorry, my son is using the vacuum cleaner.
That's all right.
I'm trying to talk to you.
Right. I like that.
Learn him early.
Yeah, exactly. Deftly, trust me, he's not being productive with the use of the vacuum cleaner. And I think that she really definitely handled that situation where she basically got Donald Trump in that interview, in that conversation that the two of them had with Chuck Schumer there, to admit that if the government shuts down, that it's going to be his shutdown.
Yeah.
And so I think the optics of that are very important. I think that resonates. I think that lasts. And I think that, I think, if you look at this from a broad perspective, depending on who you support is who you view is responsible for the shutdown. I think that the vast majority of Americans are probably in that camp. I don't like Donald Trump, so it's his fault. I don't like Nancy Pelosi, so it's her fault. But I still think this hits Donald Trump harder than it does them because he's the one that is losing one of the houses of government here in a couple of weeks. He's already kind of against the 8 ball. He had a very specific list of things that he wanted done in these negotiations, and it doesn't look like any of them are going to come to be.
And let's talk about that, because there will be some people that will say, and if you support the president, you're going to say, listen, the government is worth shutting down. It's worth shutting the government down if we're going to protect our borders. The problem is the wall, while I feel we really have to do something about this southern border, it's a real problem, but the wall is probably not going to solve the problem, right? I mean, ultimately, it's going to be great. It's going to be a promise the president has made from the campaign trail, but ultimately, it's really not going to change all that much down there.
No, it's not. But here's the reality of the situation. I mean, I think that this is sometimes what has happened with the immigration debate. The wall is not going to happen. There's just no way that Democrats are going to support that. It is politically untenable under any circumstances. Just like the president is willing to shut down the government if he doesn't get the wall, Democrats are willing to shut down the government to prevent the wall from being built.
Yeah.
So, and what I think frustrates a lot of Americans, it frustrates me as a reporter, is watching these two sides go back and forth and continue to beat their heads against the wall and make no progress.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We've been making this argument, this battle in Washington has been fought for almost 20 years. It goes back to the Reagan administration.
Yeah.
And yet no serious progress has been made on real, tangible solutions that would solve the border crisis. And there is a benefit here on both sides of the aisle to play to the extremes of their party.
Mm-hmm.
It gins up fundraising. It fires people up. It gets them to the polls. And instead of coming up with a common sense solution, there seems to be in this current political environment no benefit to being the politician that stands up and says, hey, you guys are all acting crazy.
Right.
Let's come up with a real way to get this done. Americans just are not rewarding politicians that take those stances.
I would just say you're right about that, but if it's the Reagan administration, it's probably 30 years or more.
Yeah, think about that.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
No, you're right.
Yep. Ryan, what's the real story on the young child that died of dehydration? Because if you listen to, again, the problem we have today is, if you listen to one side, it's Border Patrol. They basically killed this child by by really starving the kid. If you listen to the other side, it was the mother who irresponsibly brought the child in. And how did this child not have food and water? What is the real story? Usually, it's somewhere in the midst of the middle.
Right, and I think this is an example of that. I mean, I do think that there were border enforcement officials who did not take her medical situation seriously enough in a quick enough fashion to prevent her from losing her life. But then at the same time, I do think that there is some sort of an argument that you can make about the mother putting a child of that age through a very difficult process of trying to caravan up to the United States and cross over the border in what is a very perilous situation. But I think, Bill, this is where we often lose sight in this conversation. If you're a mother and you put your child in a situation like that, how bad must the situation be in your home country?
Yeah.
And I think whenever I have this conversation with somebody and I ask, what would you do for your child if you were in a situation like that? If it was so terrible that you felt that you couldn't keep your kids safe, what lengths would you go to protect your family? And I think that kind of starkly presents that scenario to somebody. It doesn't change their mind completely, but it makes them look at it in a bit of a different light. So, yeah, I mean, was this girl, should she have not been in that situation? I think the answer is yes, but does that mean that the United States government handled the situation perfectly? I think that answer is definitely no.
And listen, the optics alone, just it looks horrible for us as a nation to allow this to happen. In D.C., so what are you seeing? You see these new freshman members coming in. Do they stick out like a sore thumb? And what's your take on what role they will play going forward? Because, Pelosi is there despite what 16 or 17 of them said they were going to try to prevent.
Well, I think, and you look at your Congressman Anthony Brindisi is in this group. I think that this freshman class of Democrats in particular has the potential to be one of the most influential crop of new members of Congress that have ever come into Washington. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, they rode in on a very decisive wave. They received the clear mandate of the American people, and they're not going to let that group of people down. And secondly, you talk about Nancy Pelosi, and I don't think there's enough conversation here about this, about how deft she is as a politician. And you're right. There were, 16, 17 members of Congress who rode in on a wave where they won their election in part because they promised not to vote for Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
Now, there were two ways that she could handle this situation. She could shun them, throw them to the sidelines, and say, listen, you're not going to be a part of this process. We're going to give you the worst offices. You're going to sit on the worst committees. You're going to have the least amount of influence. But Nancy Pelosi's not like that. She doesn't have – she is – which is kind of an odd thing to say about a politician of this ilk, but she's actually pretty humble when it comes to these things.
Yeah.
And she understands that this is the new generation of the party. This is, the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes of the world. They have the pulse of the next group of Democratic leaders, and Nancy Pelosi wants those people to support her as well. So she's brought many of them into the fold. She's asked them what they want to work on. She's asked them to prioritize their needs. She's done things like when Ocasio-Cortez went and protested in front of her office, she actually gave her the green light and said, that's fine. If if your supporters like that, go ahead and use me as a bully pulpit to get your message across. And I think for that reason, I think you're going to see these issues and aspects of concern that these lawmakers have be brought to the forefront in a way that freshman members of Congress have never had before.
Yeah.
And then you couple that with the potential of some sort of impeachment or investigation into President Trump, which many of these people ran on, and many of them will have a strong voice in that process. I do think they have the opportunity to be very relevant very early on.
And don't you think that let's talk about Nancy Pelosi, and I'll get criticism for this, but she is far more, and I think you started out saying this, she's a far better politician than anyone ever gives her credit for, right?
Listen, you can hate her policies till the moon and back, but you cannot ignore the fact that she is one of the most skilled members of Congress that have ever been in that body.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting. I had a perception of Nancy Pelosi like a lot of people do before I went up there to actually cover her. And I've been around her enough. I've been in these press conferences that she holds. And, I'll be the first to admit that she comes off as seeming a little spacey at times. It doesn't seem like she exactly is 100% aware of what's going on. But, man, she uses even that to her advantage.
Right.
And I've been in many of these press conferences where, there's the group of reporters come in expecting the topic of conversation to be conversation A, and she easily and deftly, without you even realizing it, circles it back to being focused on conversation B, which she views as being a priority. She does little things.
Yeah.
Like during a week where they were honoring the LGBTQ community, she had on an Apple Watch, but the Apple Watch had a rainbow wristband on it. And there's just those subtle signals that she sends to her supporters and the people around her. She is one of the best, and that has had nothing to do with the policies she's holding. I'm not saying I support her or disagree with any of those, but you cannot ignore her as a strategical genius, because every time someone thinks that they have an advantage on her, she flips it around and ends up on top. And the fact that she's going to be Speaker of the House again, the way that she patiently waited for that opportunity, I think is one of the best examples of that.
Good stuff. Very interesting. She's, all this anti-Pelosi stuff. The funny part of this whole thing is she really probably orchestrated all of that and allowed it to happen.
Well, she certainly said to a lot of those young members of Congress, and the Republicans did make note of this. In many of these campaigns across the country, when these incoming now freshmen said, listen, I'm not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi, they all said, hey, you know that she's in on this, right? But that message didn't get through. It still was enough for people to feel comfortable voting for them. But I don't think there's any doubt that she said to all of them, you say whatever you need to about me. If that helps you get elected and you're a Democrat and you're going to support our agenda, I could care less. It doesn't matter. You know what they call the woman who has a bunch of incoming freshmen who say they're not going to vote for her for Speaker? They're going to call this one Speaker of the House.
Yeah,
and it worked out really, really well.
All right, Ryan, have a great holiday and safe travels. We appreciate your time. And I know that sounds so cliche, but we'll talk to you next year.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
Merry Christmas to everybody in Central New York. We love that area, as you know, and I hope everybody has a great holiday.
Thanks, Ryan. Ryan Nobles from CNN, and as he said, during the holidays, you'll be able to see him in prime time on CNN.